Happy Monday, Rush Nation. Here we are. We're getting ready for week 10. Season is very fast coming to an end, especially fantasy regular season, folks. If you are, in seasons that end in week 12, week 13, week 14, that's just 3 to 5 weeks left, and a lot of games to be played still, but also not a lot of time to close the gap. If you're, 4 wins and above, you need to start getting those wins to cement your place in the playoffs. If you're less than that at this stage, it's looking highly unlikely, but never impossible. Keep going until it's all over, and keep pounding. And if nothing else, set the satisfaction. If you're a 1-8 team, or 2-7 team, or an 0-9 team, try and get these waiver candidates away from people in the league, and torment them. Make it difficult for them. Don't just cave and fold. But that's for another podcast. I'm here to talk about who you can grab off the waiver wire to cement your places, to improve your places, to try and get more points, and to try and make your teams better, at least as bye week covers, and potentially even longer. It's definitely an interesting waiver wire at the moment. Lots of different ways that you can go at this moment in time, but I'm going to steer you through what I think are the best options. So I'm going to start at the quarterback position. Two guys that I think out there you can probably put some faith in during a bye week at the very least. The first one is Tua Tagovailoa. He's 20.3% owned. He is playing the Chargers this week, and Tua really did turn it up in week 10 or week 9. Sorry, he threw for almost 300 yards. He got a couple of touchdowns. He produced some yards, 35 yards on the ground as well. But it was the 71% completion rate. It was the poise. It was everything that he did on, he was just very controlled. It was a very controlled performance, no turnovers. It's a very, very good thing to see. And yes, okay, it's the Cardinals defense, but he's playing the Chargers defense, which certainly isn't any better than what they're getting at the Cardinals at the moment. So yeah, I really like Tua this week. That over 70% completion rate is showing signs of maturity, and the fact that he is ready to take this opportunity in the NFL that's given to him. So I think that's a smart play going forward, and someone you could stash for the rest of the week, or the rest of the weeks to come. Moving on to Drew Lock. Drew Lock put his second great game in a row up on the board on Sunday. 13.3% owned. He is playing Vegas in week 10. And he really showed that when he's fully fit, he has the mechanics and the arm to survive in the NFL. Over 300 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing score, almost 50 yards on the ground. And really, that's putting him in sort of top 10 QB numbers for the week, which is amazing. And that shows you that he's got a ceiling that I think most people didn't believe that he had. And I think that's important to look upon. So I'm sure Drew Lock is available in most of your leagues. And if you need a quarterback this week, I think that's a really smart way to go. If you're still looking for a quarterback outside of those two, the only options I can really see outside of them would be Kirk Cousins. It'd be on the fitness of Gardner Minshew to see if he's fit and ready to go. They're really the only other QBs. I wouldn't want to be starting Jake Luton or anybody like that. I think that's sort of as far as I would go from the under 30% owned. And it's quite a weird tier, because Derek Carr's ownership has gone massively up to almost 50%. Jared Goff, his ownership is around about 33%, but that's because he was on a bye. So he's someone that you could potentially see was dropped last week. And he's got his next few games as Seattle, but then he does have Tampa Bay and San Francisco before Arizona, New England, the Jets, and Seattle to end, which is a great finishing stretch. And Jared Goff should be someone who should be owned more than 33%, because I think he can put up points down the stretch, especially as they're going to be in playoff contention. But outside of those two, everyone else is over 50% owned, and probably not available in most leagues. There's a lot more quarterbacks being owned this year than normal. Moving on to running backs. Top waiver wire pickup in this position is J.D. McKissic. He's 29.8% owned on ESPN. He's got Detroit in week 10. And when I saw Kyle Allen's injury, I thought that was a season ender. Turned out it might not be. He might come back, but at the end of the day, what's important to understand is that he is someone that with Alex Smith under center will get a lot of targets. We got 14 targets yesterday when that Alex Smith came into the game. So you're talking about just over half of football, and he turned that into 9 for 65. So massive usage. Got 17 rushing yards in PPR. You have to own him because he can put up 9 catches, 10 catches, add the yardage. He's putting 16 to 18 points up. I mean, JD McKissic is kind of the argument for why you shouldn't do PPR scoring because he's not going to be the most productive. He might put 60, 70 yards up, but he is going to be those 9 to 10 catches. So, definitely own him and definitely make sure that he's on your roster and nobody else's. Duke Johnson is the other ad. David Johnson got concussion, and as a result, Duke took over. He did, 16 rushes for 41 yards and a touchdown. And he went 4 for 32 in the air. Those numbers don't sound great, with the exception of the touchdown. But 73 yards, 1 touchdown. But the key is there is he had 20 touches. You find me another player on the waiver wire right now that is going to have 18 to 20 touches. At under 30% owned, it's not going to happen. There probably is someone out on your wires who you could add who could potentially do that for you. Looking at people who you could potentially be looking for outside of them, Jordan Wilkins, but I'm not trusting his usage going forward. But he's someone that potentially could be someone that you could be picking up and using. Please excuse me. But yeah, I think outside of that, I mean, P. Ryan, his usage continues to grow, even though we haven't seen Monday Night Football yet. But he's someone of interest, maybe. I think that's really Devonta Freeman. He's 42% owned. If he comes back, he'll be a factor for sure. But I think that's really sort of about it moving forward, unless you want to go and grab some lower end handcuffs. And this is the type of time to be getting these handcuffs before the player gets injured. So I'm looking here, Benny Snell, 7.6% owned. He's a player who is the primary handcuff to James Conner. And if James Conner, he's done very well to stay fit throughout the season, but if James Conner gets hurt, Benny Snell becomes instantly viable. So, I like week 10, week 11 as those sorts of times to be picking up players. So Benny Snell, 7.6% owned. Jordan Wilkins, 7% owned. I'm looking here to see if they're AJ Dillon, 4.7% owned, but then you still have Jamal Williams to handle in there. Cam Akers has dropped, his usage has dropped, or his percentage owned has dropped to 31.7% owned. He's someone that could go and get more and more work as the season goes on, especially as he's the one with the draft capital as well. He's probably someone in my leagues, if I was seeing him, I'd be picking up. Tony Pollard, 44.3% owned, and Zeke has got a slight injury and is on a little bit of a count yesterday, so that's one to keep an eye on as well. So there's a few players here that Giovanni Bernard is another one, 58.5% owned, that you could be picking up. Jamal Williams, 61.2% owned. If these players are available in your leagues, definitely go and grab them. They're really, really good additions to your roster, and I've given you a couple of lower owned names here. I'm just seeing if there's anyone else out here that's worth picking up. Jaden Samuels, potentially, I don't see him getting the role. Eno Benjamin, I think, has to be owned more than 0.4%. I know he's hurt right now, but if there's a chance that he's going to be coming back, then I think he's someone that could be playing, especially if there's an injury to Chase Edmonds. So he is the next man up potentially there. So that's another one to keep an eye out on. But it's also one that might not pan out, but if you've got the space, definitely do it. Moving on to wide receivers, Danny Amendola, 6.9% owned. He is Washington in week 10. And it was a very similar story to earlier in the season. Everyone thought that Marvin Jones was going to get a lot of additional work, or it was going to be Marvin Hall. When it turned out it was Danny Amendola that got most of the work. His 10 targets with 7 catches for 77 yards led the team in all those categories. He's basically doing all the ugly work between the 20s. So again, touchdown upside, not really there that often. Might sneak in once or twice, but he's not going to be getting a lot of touchdowns, a lot of red zone looks. But 7 for 77 is 14.7 fantasy points in PPR. So again, if you play the PPR league, Danny Amendola has to be owned. He's going to be getting the targets at least while Golladay is out. The other option is Tim Patrick. He's 14.4% owned. He has Vegas in week 10. Patrick is returning to health. Stat line looks pretty uninteresting. 4 for 29 and 1. Looks like a tight end kind of stat line. But it's heavily misleading because he had 9 targets. So he is getting the ball. He's getting looked at. He's a read in the offense, an early read in this offense, and I think he's someone who will bounce back even better next week. But hey, you're talking about almost 13 PPR points with that score. I think Patrick's better than that. I think he's good for pretty similar numbers to Amendola, like a 7 for 80 odd kind of range is a good outcome for him, and it's 15 PPR points. So again, another player I think is worth looking at out there. In terms of maybe players slightly better owned than that, Curtis Samuel was the one that immediately sort of jumped to mind with his usage. Curtis Samuel is over 40% rostered, but he's now starting to become fantasy relevant. He's now getting direct snaps. He's scored 4 touchdowns in 3 games. He's really starting to be involved as a weapon in this offense. So he's someone I do like as a weapon going forward if he's available in your league, but he is outside the 30% owned. He's 42.2% owned. So he's someone I'm definitely interested in, especially if I've got like T.Y. Hilton, who I think at this stage is probably droppable. I think he's someone that you can go ahead and just drop and replace with Curtis Samuel, and I think he'll end up better across the season that way. Laviska Shenault, he did go off injured yesterday. He is still only 22.5% owned. I think he has a real chance to be the alpha in this offense. He's had 4 games of over 10 points in PPR, so he has got that ability. But yeah, he is suffering, as I kind of said he might do it, in the preseason, that he does get injuries. So he's someone, but should be owned by more than 22.5% of teams. And Keelan Cole, 18.3% of teams. If Shenault is injured, Keelan Cole is the guy who might get more work. It didn't really pan out that way yesterday, but again, he's had 4 weeks again of himself over 10. So there's some slightly lower. If I go even further down to less likely owned, some of these players, Damari Bird, 1.1% owned. Damari Bird potentially is going to be getting more and more work as there's no Edelman, but I'm not overly keen on picking up Patriots players right now, but he is someone who, again, could get some work. Marvin Hall, he got 5 targets yesterday, didn't do too much with them, 3 for 28, but the previous week he got 7 targets and wrapped off 4 for 113. So he's someone that could get some work. He's 1.1% owned. That's really it. Gabriel Davis continues to keep getting in the end zone again. He had a good day yesterday, 4 for 70 off 5 targets and a touchdown, and he's got that sort of boom or bust capability if you're in a really deep league. Again, we're talking about 0.9% owned. Gabriel Davis is someone that perhaps should be owned a lot more than he is. So there's a few, and Jalen Guyton is another one. Jalen Guyton, okay, he's had 2 weeks in a row where he's only caught 1 pass for under 10 yards, but when he does break a run, he's a guy who will score a 70-yard touchdown, a 60-yard touchdown. So he's a good guy if you play in those tiered PPR leagues. As someone that you could potentially go and own. And again, it's very boom or bust. But when you're playing in really deep leagues, sometimes those players really, really do perform and break up for you. So moving on to tight ends, this is really thin position right now. Jordan Reed for me is the best option out there. He's 24.6% owned, and he has the Saints in week 10. And he didn't do much on Thursday, but then nobody in the receiving core did anything of merit, really, with the exception of Richie James. He was the only one that really did anything. Everyone else was kind of starved of work. So but at the end of the day, with Kittle not being there, the tight end position is up for grabs between him and Ross Dwelly. And this is Jordan Reed. If he's fit, he's healthy, as he's demonstrated earlier in the season, he's more likely to get that work and be given the ball. So of all the guys under 30% owned on the waiver wire for tight ends, Reed is the only one that could potentially produce tight end 1 weeks. So that's why I think he's the number 1 ad this week. Irv Smith is out there as well. He's only 3.9% owned, but Irv Smith kind of proved on Sunday what he is. 2 targets, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns. That's how he does it. Is he he's never going to really grab more than four balls in the game, but he has that ultimate boom or bust scenario. So he could get into the end zone, like he did twice on Sunday. And against Chicago, I kind of back him. I like him to get into the end zone now on Sunday. But your hopes are he scores. If he doesn't score, he's not putting up anything else. There's no safety blanket with him. It's either a bust week or a boom week. So if you're really desperate at a position and you're struggling, Irv Smith is a guy out there that should definitely be owned. I think he's someone that could produce a lot for you this week. In terms of tight ends and tight end, over 30% owned potentially. Dallas Goedert is out there. In a lot of leagues, he's 39.6% owned. I think he is someone that is a really good option. Coming back off IR, coming back off a bye now. He's had a week to get healthy. I think he's someone that should be owned a lot more than he is, and someone that should be able to give you some upside. Other ones out there, I've talked about them before. Dalton Schultz, Logan Thomas. Dalton Schultz, 22.4% owned, but with a fourth string quarterback, I'm not sure. Logan Thomas, 16.2% owned. He's again touchdown or bust option, but he does get the looks. He definitely is getting red zone targets. Wasn't quite his day, 3 for 28 yesterday, but he did have 6 targets, and that's kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for that volume of targets, and he had a few games in a row it was 4, but he's 6 now. It looks like that might be creeping up a bit. Trey Burton's still out there. I think for me, he's a solid tight end. Didn't do much this week. Literally just had the 1 catch for 6 yards, but again 4 targets. Typically, what he's getting between 4 and 6 targets. So he's another one. If you need a really deep stash, Ross Dwelly, he's 3% owned. Maybe he wins that job out. Maybe he wins that job out over Jordan Reed. Who knows? The one I really like, who's an absolute steal, and he's so cheap, is Jordan Aikens. He's been really injured. He's down to 2.2% owned. Okay, 2 for 19 on Sunday, but typically he's the guy who gets the red zone looks more often than not. So I do like Jordan Aikens. I think he's the one I would want to own out of that tight end committee that they've got out there. Right, kicker this week for me is Mike Badgley. For me, I'm shocked he's still out there in as many leagues as he is. 19.5% owned. He has Miami this week. His last 3 games have been 8 points, 15 points, and 8 points. They're a high-scoring offense. They definitely put up a lot of points, but I think Miami's D can also hold them, which will give them more field goal opportunities as well. So Mike Badgley, I'd like him to get over 8 points this week. So he's my kicker pick. DST, this is really thin. So I've gone with the Lions. Basically, they're at home. They're against Washington. They're playing a 3rd-string quarterback. The Lions haven't done much in the last couple of games at all. Last 3 games, they've scored 2 points combined. So not great, but I think this is the kind of game where they buck the trend. And as a result, I think they're the ones under 30% owned I would want to own. So they are 3.7% owned. So they should be available almost everywhere. For me, the Eagles are the best bet. Eagles are 37.3% owned, and they get the New York Giants next. And you know how much they like to turn over the football. So I think they're a really, really good bet next week for sure. In terms of other DSTs, I might be targeting if they were free. Maybe the Saints. They put up a great performance against Tampa. Painful for me to watch, but they got San Francisco next, who are really hurting. So that might be a really good play for them. And then also you've got, I guess the other one I'd look at, the Texans. Their matchup's pretty good this week. They've got Cleveland again. They can turn the ball over. They're another one I'd be keeping an eye on. So they're kind of the options I would be looking at. But I like the Lions this week. They should be available everywhere. Just feel free to go pick those up. It shouldn't cost you anything. And just go make the most of it. But that'll do it for this week. I hope you found some additional value out of this Waiver Wire podcast. Please give us a rating on iTunes. Feel free to ask any questions on all the appropriate channels. We do have our Patreon. We're going to be doing more things on the Patreon coming soon to that will be more exclusive just for our subscribers who support and back the podcast. So until the flagship show, keep rushing, Rush Nation. Enjoy it. Enjoy the game tonight, even though it's probably not one most people will stay up for. But till next time, keep rushing.